Maya Johnson stood frozen at the entrance of the grand ballroom, her heart pounding against her ribs. The crystal chandelier light reflected off her golden evening gown, sending small sparkles across the marble floor. But she couldn't move. Not because all eyes had turned to her, though they had, but because of what she had just overheard in the coat room. Two board members discussing how her boss, CEO Alexander Stone, planned to sell the company to overseas investors, putting hundreds of employees out of work. Including her. 5 years. She had given him 5 years of her life. 5 years of early mornings, late nights, canceled weekends and postponed vacations. All because she believed in him and the company they were building together. Well, not really together. He was the billionaire CEO who made the decisions. She was just his executive assistant who made sure those decisions happened. But she knew the company better than anyone. She knew the employees, their families, their struggles and their triumphs. She had helped organize birthday parties for their children and sent flowers when loved ones passed away. This company wasn't just a business to her, it was a family. And Alexander was about to destroy it all. The champagne glass in her hand trembled. She had come to this charity gala to support him, to make sure everything went perfectly as always. She had even spent 2 months' salary on this dress because she wanted to represent him well. What a fool she had been. From across the room, she could see Alexander's tall figure, his broad shoulders filling out his tuxedo perfectly. His dark hair was styled away from his face, highlighting his strong jawline. He was talking to potential investors, that charming smile on his face that she knew so well. That smile that now seemed like a lie. Maya? Are you okay? It was Trisha from HR looking concerned. Maya straightened her spine, lifted her chin and smiled. I'm fine, she said, though her heart was breaking. Not just for herself but for everyone who would soon be out of a job. Just needed a moment. Trisha nodded, though she didn't look convinced. You look stunning, by the way. I've never seen you dressed up like this. Maya glanced down at her gown. She had fallen in love with it the moment she saw it in the boutique window. The gold color complemented her dark skin perfectly, and the cut accentuated her curves in a way her work clothes never did. She had splurged on it, telling herself it was an investment for networking events like this. Now she wondered if she'd ever wear it again after tonight. Across the room, Alexander's eyes finally found her. For a moment, he seemed to freeze mid-sentence, his gaze locked on her. She had worked with him for years, but she had never seen that expression on his face before. It didn't matter. Not anymore. Not after what she'd just learned. Maya took a deep breath and moved through the crowd toward him. People parted for her, some doing double takes as they recognized the usually conservatively dressed assistant in this transformed state. But she barely noticed them. She had only one mission tonight. To confront Alexander Stone and make him understand exactly what his decision would do to the people who had dedicated their lives to his company. As she approached, Alexander excused himself from his conversation and met her halfway. Maya, he said, his voice lower than usual. You look. We need to talk, she interrupted, keeping her voice steady despite the storm inside her. Now. His eyebrows raised slightly at her tone, but he nodded and gestured toward the terrace doors. After you. The cool night air hit her bare shoulders as they stepped outside, away from the music and chatter. The city lights sparkled below them, a view that would normally take her breath away. Now it just reminded her of all the homes that would be affected by what was coming. I overheard Richards and Thompson talking, she said, turning to face him. About the sale. About the layoffs. Alexander's expression changed immediately, his features hardening. You shouldn't listen to rumors, Maya. Don't. She held up a hand. Don't lie to me. Not after everything I've done for you. For this company. For a moment they just stared at each other. 5 years of working side by side and suddenly it felt like they were strangers. It's complicated, he finally said. It's wrong, she corrected him. These people trust you. I trusted you. Something flashed in his eyes, regret? Guilt? She couldn't tell. I didn't come to this decision lightly, Alexander said, running a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration she'd only seen a few times before. The market is changing. We're facing pressures you don't understand. Then help me understand, Maya challenged. Because from where I'm standing it looks like you're taking the easy way out. Selling off everything we've built for a quick profit. His voice had an edge to it now. Since when is this your company, Maya? The words stung more than they should have. She took a step back, suddenly aware of how close they had been standing. You're right, she said quietly. It's not my company. But those are my friends in there. People who have given everything to your vision. Alexander turned away from her, gripping the terrace railing as he looked out at the city. For a long moment he was silent. "I never wanted it to come to this," he finally said. "But sometimes being a leader means making the hard choices. Choices that people won't understand." Maya shook her head even though he couldn't see her. "No. Sometimes being a leader means finding another way when the easy choice would hurt people who depend on you." She waited for him to respond, but he remained silent, his back to her, shoulders rigid under his expensive tuxedo. "I thought you were better than this," she said softly. "I guess I was wrong." Maya turned to leave, her golden dress catching the moonlight. She had said what she needed to say. Tomorrow she would start looking for a new job, one with a boss who valued loyalty and community as much as she did. Her heart ached at the thought of leaving, but she couldn't stay and watch everything fall apart. "Maya, wait." Alexander's voice stopped her at the terrace door. "There's something you don't know." She turned back, finding him facing her now, his expression more vulnerable than she had ever seen it. "What?" she asked, not sure she wanted to hear whatever excuse he was about to offer. "The reason I'm at this gala tonight," he said, taking a step toward her. "The reason I brought the whole executive team. It's not just for charity." Maya waited, arms crossed protectively over her chest. "I'm announcing a major expansion," Alexander continued. "New offices in 3 cities. Hundreds of new jobs. And an employee ownership program that will give everyone who's been with the company for more than 2 years a stake in our future." Maya blinked, trying to process his words. "But," Richards and Thompson said. "Richards and Thompson don't know everything," Alexander said. "Only a handful of people know about this plan. I was going to announce it tonight after the dinner." "But why all the secrecy?" Maya asked, confused. Alexander stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne. "Because I've been working on this deal for months and I couldn't risk any leaks. The wrong information getting out could have tanked everything." Maya's mind raced, trying to reconcile what she'd overheard with what he was telling her now. "So you're not selling the company? No one's losing their jobs." A small smile touched Alexander's lips. "Just the opposite. We're growing. Expanding. And I want you by my side when we do." The relief that flooded through her was so intense that her knees felt weak. She wasn't losing her job. Her friends weren't losing theirs. Everything she thought she knew had been wrong. But as she looked up at Alexander, at the way he was looking at her now, so different from how he'd ever looked at her before, she realized that tonight, everything had changed between them. And she wasn't sure where they would go from here. Maya's alarm blared at 5 a.m., just like every weekday for the past 5 years. She reached out to silence it, her mind immediately racing with the day's to-do list. Alexander had 3 meetings before lunch and she needed to prepare all the materials. There was also that issue with the Tokyo office that needed attention, and the quarterly reports were due by end of day. But as she sat up in bed, memories from last night's gala flooded back. The golden dress now hanging in her closet. The confrontation on the terrace. The revelation about the company's future. And most unsettling of all, the way Alexander had looked at her. Really looked at her, for the first time. "Get it together, Maya," she muttered to herself as she headed for the shower. Nothing's changed. But that wasn't entirely true, was it? Something had shifted between them. She just wasn't sure what it meant. 45 minutes later, she was walking into the office building, dressed in her usual professional attire. A navy pencil skirt, white blouse, and sensible heels. Her braids were pulled back into a neat bun, and her makeup was subtle but polished. This was the Maya Johnson everyone at Stone Enterprises knew. Efficient, capable, and always put together. "Morning, Maya," called the security guard at the front desk. "Morning, Joe," she replied with a warm smile. "How's Melissa doing with the college applications?" "Driving us both crazy," Joe chuckled. "But she's got her heart set on Howard University." "She'll get in," Maya assured him. "She's a brilliant girl." These were the small moments she cherished, knowing the staff not just as employees but as people with lives and dreams beyond these walls. It was what made this place special to her. By 6:15 she was at her desk outside Alexander's office, organizing his day while sipping her first coffee of the morning. The office was quiet at this hour, just the way she liked it. Time to focus before the chaos began. At 7:30 sharp, the elevator doors opened and Alexander Stone strode in. Maya's heart did an unexpected little jump that she immediately tried to ignore. "Good morning," he said, stopping at her desk. There was something different in his voice, a slight hesitation that wasn't usually there. "Good morning, Mr. Stone," she replied professionally, standing to hand him his schedule and messages. Your 8:30 with the development team is confirmed, and I've prepared the briefing notes for your 10 o'clock with the Japanese investors. Alexander took the papers, but his eyes stayed on her face. Maya, about last night? I've also ordered in breakfast for the development meeting, she continued quickly, not ready to address what had happened between them. And I took the liberty of moving your lunch with Peterson to tomorrow. The quarterly reports need your sign-off by 5 o'clock, and I thought you might need the time. A small smile touched his lips. Always thinking ahead. It's my job, sir. Alexander nodded, though something in his expression suggested he wanted to say more. Instead, he simply said, "Thank you, Maya," before heading into his office. She sat back down, releasing a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They would need to talk about last night eventually, but not here, not now, with the office starting to fill with people. The morning passed in a blur of activity. Maya attended the development meeting with Alexander, taking detailed notes and following up on action items immediately afterward. She handled 3 minor crises before lunch, smoothed over a miscommunication with the marketing department, and somehow still managed to eat half a sandwich at her desk. It was 3:45 when Alexander called her into his office. "Close the door, please," he said, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. Maya did as asked, her stomach tightening with nervousness. "Is everything all right with the Japanese investors?" "The deal is moving forward," he confirmed. "That's not why I called you in." She waited, hands clasped in front of her. Alexander turned to face her. "I need your help with the announcement tonight." The expansion plan. In the rush of the day, she'd almost forgotten that was happening tonight, at the company-wide quarterly meeting. "Of course," she said. "What do you need?" "Not just with logistics," he clarified. "I want you beside me when I make the announcement." Maya blinked in surprise. "Beside you? But that's usually where the board members stand." "This expansion plan was as much your vision as mine," Alexander said, taking a step toward her. "All those nights we stayed late, working through the possibilities. The suggestions you made about employee ownership, that ended up being the cornerstone of the whole plan." She remembered those nights. Long hours bent over spreadsheets and market analyses, ordering in dinner, sometimes talking about more than just business as the night grew late. She'd made suggestions, yes, but she never expected him to actually implement them, let alone give her credit. "I just did my job," she said softly. Alexander shook his head. "No. You did more than that. You challenged me to be better. To think beyond just profits." There was that look again, the one from last night, that made her feel both seen and exposed at the same time. "Maya," he continued, his voice gentle. "Last night, when you confronted me on that terrace, I realized something." Her heart began to beat faster. "What did you realize?" "That I've been taking you for granted." His admission hung in the air between them. "For years you've been more than just an assistant. You've been my right hand, my sounding board, sometimes my conscience. But I never acknowledged that. Not to you, not to anyone else, not even to myself." Maya didn't know what to say. This vulnerability from Alexander was new territory. "And then I saw you in that golden dress," he added with a small smile, "looking like you stepped out of a dream, and it hit me just how blind I've been." Heat rose to her cheeks. "Mr. Stone?" "Alexander," he corrected. "After 5 years, I think you've earned the right to use my first name, at least in private." The simple request felt monumental somehow, a shift in their carefully maintained professional boundaries. "Alexander," she said, testing the name on her lips. It felt intimate, saying it aloud to him. He smiled, seeming pleased. "Much better." A knock at the door broke the moment, and Maya stepped back, suddenly aware of how close they had been standing. "That will be Nathan from legal with the final contracts," she said, smoothing her skirt unnecessarily. Alexander nodded, his expression shifting back to professional. "Send him in. But think about what I said. About standing with me tonight." "I will," she promised, turning to open the door. For the rest of the afternoon, Maya tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept returning to their conversation. To the way Alexander, it still felt strange to think of him by his first name, had looked at her, spoken to her. As if seeing her in that dress last night had somehow made her visible to him in a way she hadn't been before. Part of her was flattered. Another part was wary. She had worked too hard to establish herself as a professional to be reduced to just another woman who had caught the boss's eye because of a pretty dress. But Alexander's words suggested it was more than that. He had acknowledged her contributions, her value beyond just executing his commands. At 6:30 p.m., the large conference room was filled with employees gathered for the quarterly meeting. Maya stood at the back, clipboard in hand, making sure everything ran smoothly as always. Alexander took the podium at exactly 6:45. He looked confident, commanding the room's attention effortlessly in his perfectly tailored suit. Before we review the quarter, he began, I have an important announcement to make. One that will shape the future of Stone Enterprises for years to come. The room grew quiet, tension building as people sensed something big was coming. But first, Alexander continued, his eyes scanning the crowd, I'd like to ask someone very special to join me up here. Someone without whom none of this would be possible. Maya's heart skipped a beat as his gaze found her. Maya Johnson, he said, extending his hand toward her. Would you please come up here? A murmur went through the crowd as all heads turned in her direction. For a moment, Maya couldn't move, stunned by this public acknowledgement. Then slowly she walked forward, feeling hundreds of eyes on her. As she approached the podium, Alexander reached out and took her hand, guiding her to stand beside him. Many of you know Maya as my executive assistant, he said to the crowd. What you might not know is that she has been the heart of this company, the one who reminds us all what we're really working for. And it is largely thanks to her vision that I'm able to make tonight's announcement. Maya stood there, trying to maintain her composure as Alexander revealed the expansion plans to gasps and then applause from the crowd. He detailed the new offices, the jobs that would be created, and finally the employee ownership program. Starting next month, he declared, every employee who has been with us for 2 years or more will receive shares in the company. Because Stone Enterprises isn't just mine anymore, it's ours. The room erupted in cheers and applause. Maya felt tears pricking her eyes as she watched the faces of people who had just learned they would now be part owners of the company they worked for. And one more announcement, Alexander said when the noise died down. Effective immediately, Maya Johnson is being promoted to Chief of Staff, with a seat on the executive board. This time the cheers were directed at her. Maya's hand flew to her mouth in shock. They hadn't discussed this. She hadn't even known such a position was being created. As the meeting broke up and people came forward to congratulate her, Maya felt overwhelmed. Everything was changing so fast. She caught Alexander watching her from across the room, a warm smile on his face. Later, as the office emptied and Maya packed up her things at her desk, Alexander approached. You surprised me, she said, looking up at him. Chief of Staff. He leaned against her desk, loosening his tie slightly. You surprised me first, in that golden dress. I figured it was only fair to return the favor. Despite herself, Maya laughed. Is that what this is about? My dress? No, Alexander said, his expression growing serious. It's about finally seeing what's been right in front of me all along. The office was quiet now, everyone else gone home. It was just the two of them as it had been on so many late nights before. But tonight felt different. Come have dinner with me, Alexander said softly. Not as my assistant. Not even as my chief of staff. Just as Maya. She looked at him, this man she had worked alongside for 5 years, thinking she knew him completely. Now she wondered if they were just beginning to truly know each other. Yes, she said simply. I'd like that. As they walked to the elevator together, Maya realized that while nothing had changed on the outside, the office was the same, her desk was the same, everything felt different. A new chapter was beginning for her, for the company, and maybe for her and Alexander together. The golden dress had changed everything, but not in the way she might have expected. It hadn't just caught Alexander's eye, it had made him see her heart. The restaurant Alexander chose was not what Maya expected. Instead of one of the high-end establishments where he usually entertained clients, places with waiting lists months long and prices that made her wince, he drove them to a small, family-owned Italian restaurant tucked away on a quiet street. How do you know about this place? She asked as they stepped inside. The restaurant was warm and inviting, with checkered tablecloths and the rich smell of garlic and tomato sauce in the air. My grandmother used to bring me here when I was a boy, Alexander explained, greeted warmly by an elderly man who embraced him like family. Alessandro. It has been too long, the man exclaimed. Uncle Paolo, Alexander replied with genuine affection. Everything looks exactly the same. Why change perfection? Paolo gestured to Maya. And who is this beautiful woman you bring to us tonight? This is Maya, Alexander said, his hand lightly touching the small of her back. Maya, this is Paolo Rossi. His family has owned this restaurant for over 50 years. It's lovely to meet you, Maya said, charmed by the man's twinkling eyes and wide smile. Any friend of Alessandro's family here, Paolo declared, leading them to a quiet table in the corner. I will bring you my best wine. Once they were seated, Maya looked around, taking in the framed family photos on the walls, the worn but clean floors, the mismatched chairs that somehow added to the charm. You grew up in this neighborhood? She asked, realizing how little she knew about Alexander's childhood. He nodded, unfolding his napkin. Until I was 12. My grandmother lived a few blocks from here in a small apartment above a bakery. I spent most weekends with her while my parents worked. I had no idea, Maya admitted. In the 5 years they'd worked together, personal details like this had rarely come up. Alexander smiled slightly. There's a lot we don't know about each other, isn't there? Despite all the time we've spent together. It was true. She knew his professional life inside and out. His coffee preference, black, no sugar, his allergies, shellfish, which clients irritated him the most. But his past, his dreams beyond the company, the things that made him who he was, those remained mysteries. Paolo returned with a bottle of red wine, pouring them each a glass before promising to bring only the best for them. I don't think we're going to need menus, Alexander said after the older man had left. Maya laughed. I'm guessing you've been here enough times to know what's good? Everything's good, he said. But Paolo has his own ideas about what we should eat. It's best not to argue. True to Alexander's word, no menus appeared. Instead, a parade of dishes began to arrive. Antipasto with cured meats and cheeses, homemade focaccia still warm from the oven, handmade pasta in a simple but perfect tomato sauce. As they ate, they talked, really talked for the first time. Not about work deadlines or business strategies, but about themselves. Maya told him about growing up in Philadelphia, the youngest of 3 sisters, how she'd put herself through college working 2 jobs. Alexander shared stories of his grandmother teaching him to make pasta by hand, his first business selling lemonade on the street corner, the scholarship that had sent him to an elite boarding school at 12, changing the trajectory of his life. That must have been hard, Maya said. Leaving your neighborhood, your grandmother. Alexander nodded, his expression distant for a moment. It was. I felt like I had one foot in each world for a long time. Never quite fitting in anywhere. Is that why you pushed so hard? To prove you belonged? He looked at her with surprise as if he hadn't expected such insight. Maybe. I never really thought about it that way. They were interrupted by Paolo bringing dessert, homemade tiramisu and 2 small glasses of limoncello. For Alessandro and his beautiful date, Paolo announced with a wink before retreating. Maya felt her cheeks warm at the word date. Was that what this was? It had started as dinner between colleagues, but somewhere between the antipasto and now, it had become something more intimate. This is nice, she said softly. Seeing this side of you. Alexander's eyes met hers across the table. What side is that? The real Alexander. Not just the CEO everyone sees at the office. He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. I like being just Alexander with you. Not Mr. Stone. The way he said it made her heart beat a little faster. Later, as they walked back to his car, the night air cool against their skin, their hands brushed accidentally. Then, not so accidentally, Alexander's fingers interlaced with hers. Maya didn't pull away. I should take you home, he said, but he made no move to unlock the car. Maya looked up at him, at the way the streetlight cast shadows across his face. In that moment he wasn't her boss. He was just a man looking at her like she was something precious. Yes, she agreed softly. You should. The drive to her apartment was quiet, a comfortable silence between them. When he pulled up outside her building, Alexander turned off the engine. I'll walk you to your door, he said. At her apartment door, Maya turned to face him. Thank you for dinner. And for the promotion, though we still need to talk about that. Alexander nodded, standing close enough that she could smell his cologne. Tomorrow. We can discuss all the details tomorrow. Tomorrow, she agreed. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the air between them charged with possibility. Then Alexander leaned down, slowly, giving her time to step back if she wanted to. She didn't. His lips met hers in a gentle kiss, brief but full of promise. When he pulled back, his eyes searched hers. Good night, Maya, he said softly. Good night, Alexander, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. As she closed her door behind her and leaned against it, heart racing, Maya knew that tomorrow, everything at the office would be different. She was no longer just his assistant. She was something more. The question was, what exactly did that mean for both of them? Maya walked into the office the next morning acutely aware of the whispers that followed her. The news of her promotion had spread like wildfire, and not everyone was happy about it. She went from assistant to executive overnight, she overheard one of the marketing associates say in the break room. Makes you wonder what she did to earn that. Maya stiffened but kept her head high as she poured her coffee. She had expected this. In the corporate world, rapid promotions were often met with suspicion, especially when they involved a woman moving up from an administrative role. What she hadn't expected was how much it would hurt, hearing colleagues she'd worked with for years questioning her merit. "Excuse me," she said politely, waiting for the marketing team to move so she could get to the cream. They scattered, avoiding her eyes, the conversation dropping to silence. Back at her desk, still her assistant's desk until her new office was ready, Maya tried to focus on the transition plan she was creating. Alexander had sent her a detailed email outlining her new responsibilities as chief of staff, and the list was both exciting and intimidating. Maya. The voice made her look up. It was Richard Thompson, one of the board members she'd overheard at the gala. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," she said, her tone professional. "I wonder if I might have a word with Alexander," he said, not bothering to congratulate her on the promotion. "Is he in?" "He's on a call right now," Maya replied. "But he should be free in about 20 minutes. I can let him know you'd like to see him." Thompson frowned. "This is rather important. Perhaps you could interrupt him?" Before Maya could respond, Alexander's office door opened. "Richard," he said, clearly having heard the exchange. "I was just about to call you. Come in." As Thompson entered Alexander's office, he gave Maya a look that spoke volumes. He didn't think she deserved her new position. The rest of the morning continued in much the same vein. Some colleagues were genuinely happy for her, stopping by to offer congratulations. Others were coolly polite, their smiles not reaching their eyes. And a few, like Thompson, made no effort to hide their disapproval. By lunchtime, Maya had a headache forming behind her eyes. She was just considering stepping out for some fresh air when Alexander emerged from his office. "Have you eaten?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes concerned as he took in her expression. "Not yet," she admitted. "Let's go. I need to talk to you about the Tokyo deal anyway." She knew what he was doing, giving them a legitimate business reason to be seen leaving together, and she appreciated it. The last thing she needed was more fuel for the rumor mill. They walked to a small park a block from the office, buying sandwiches from a food truck along the way. Sitting on a bench beneath a sprawling oak tree, they were just another pair of professionals having a working lunch. "Rough morning?" Alexander asked once they were settled. Maya sighed. "That obvious, huh?" "Only to someone who knows you well." He unwrapped his sandwich. "The whispers will die down, you know. Once people see what you bring to the table in your new role. Some of them think I brought something else to the table to get this job," Maya said quietly, the hurt she'd been suppressing all morning finally surfacing. Alexander's expression darkened. "Who said that? I want names." "It doesn't matter," she said, touched by his anger on her behalf but knowing it wouldn't help. "It's what people always think when a woman moves up quickly, especially a black woman. That I must have slept my way into the position." "Maya." "The irony is," she continued, "I've spent 5 years proving myself, working twice as hard as everyone else, making sure I was always professional, always prepared. And now, after one dinner..." She trailed off, the implication clear. Alexander was quiet for a moment, considering her words. "Do you regret it? Dinner last night? The kiss?" Maya looked at him, at the genuine concern in his eyes. "No," she said honestly. "I don't. But the timing isn't great, is it? It just confirms what they think, that there's something going on between us." "There is something going on between us," Alexander said softly. "Something that started long before last night, if I'm being honest with myself." Her heart skipped at his words, but she forced herself to be practical. "Whatever this is, whatever we're feeling, we need to be careful. For both our sakes." Alexander nodded slowly. "You're right. Of course you're right." He paused, then added, "But I'm not sorry about promoting you. You've earned it, Maya. 100 times over. Anyone who can't see that isn't paying attention." His faith in her warmed something inside her. "Thank you. That means a lot." They finished their lunch talking about work matters, the Tokyo deal, her transition plan, who would replace her as his assistant. As they walked back to the office, Alexander said, "I have back-to-back meetings all afternoon, but I'd like to take you to dinner again tonight. Somewhere further from the office this time." Maya hesitated. "Alexander." "As colleagues," he clarified. "To discuss your new role in more detail. Nothing more." She knew it was a transparent excuse, but she also knew they needed to talk about where things stood between them, preferably away from the office gossip. "Okay," she agreed. but I'm driving myself. He smiled. Smart. I'll text you the address. Back at her desk, Maya found herself both looking forward to and dreading the evening ahead. Whatever was developing between her and Alexander was complicated by their professional relationship, by the company politics, by the very real possibility that people would attribute her success to his interest in her rather than her own abilities. But there was also no denying the connection between them, something that had perhaps been there all along, hidden beneath layers of professionalism and hierarchy. As she turned back to her work, Maya caught sight of Thompson and another board member watching her from across the office, their heads bent together in conversation. She straightened her spine and met their gaze steadily until they looked away. Let them whisper, she decided. She knew her worth, and so did Alexander. In time she would prove it to everyone else too. The restaurant Alexander had chosen for their second dinner was indeed far from the office. A quiet, elegant place on the outskirts of the city where they were unlikely to run into anyone from work. It was upscale without being showy, with soft lighting and tables spaced far enough apart for private conversation. Maya arrived 15 minutes late, having stopped at home to change out of her work clothes into a simple black dress. As the host led her to Alexander's table, she saw him stand, his eyes warming as they took her in. Sorry I'm late, she said as she took her seat. Traffic was worse than I expected. You're worth waiting for, Alexander replied, the compliment simple but sincere. The waiter appeared with menus and a wine list, giving them a moment to settle in. Once they had ordered, Alexander leaned forward slightly. How was the rest of your day? Maya gave a small shrug. Better than the morning. I had meetings with the department heads to discuss the transition. Most were supportive. She didn't mention the few who weren't, who had made their reservations about her new role clear. And the Tokyo deal? Alexander asked. The contracts are ready for your signature. I've highlighted the sections that were modified based on our last discussion. He nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. Always thorough. It's my job, she said automatically, then caught herself. Or it was until yesterday. Old habits, Alexander agreed. Speaking of which, we should talk about your new role. Maya welcomed the shift to professional ground. This was comfortable territory for them both. As chief of staff, you'll be my right hand in a more official capacity, Alexander explained. Overseeing operations across departments, being my eyes and ears when I can't be there, helping shape our strategic direction. It's a big step up from managing your calendar and filing expense reports, Maya observed. But not from what you've already been doing unofficially for years, he countered. You've been advising me on decisions, anticipating problems before they arise, understanding the needs of our employees in ways I never could. The only difference now is that you'll get the title and the salary to match. Maya took a sip of her wine, considering his words. And the board? Are they on board with this? She couldn't help the small pun, which made Alexander smile. Most of them, he said honestly. The ones who matter. Thompson is adjusting to the idea. Thompson thinks I'm sleeping with you to get ahead, Maya said bluntly. Alexander didn't flinch at her directness. Thompson is an old-school dinosaur who can't imagine a woman advancing on merit alone. His opinion doesn't matter to me. But it should, Maya insisted. He's on your board. And he's not the only one thinking it. She set down her glass. Alexander, we need to talk about what happened last night. The kiss. His expression softened. I've been thinking about it all day. So have I, she admitted. And as much as I enjoyed it, I think we need to take a step back. Alexander's brow furrowed. Maya. Please let me finish, she said gently. This promotion is a huge opportunity for me. One I've worked for years to earn. But if we start something personal now, it will always be shadowed by doubts. People will always wonder if I got where I am because of my relationship with you. I don't care what people think, Alexander said, an edge of frustration in his voice. But I do, Maya replied. I have to. I've worked too hard to have my accomplishments dismissed that way. She took a deep breath. I think we need to keep things strictly professional, at least until I've established myself in this new role. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. How long would that take, do you think? I don't know, she said honestly. A few months, maybe. He nodded slowly. And then? The question hung between them, full of possibility. Maya felt her resolve wavering under his steady gaze. And then we'll see where we stand, she said finally. Their food arrived, giving them both a moment to regroup. As they ate, they steered the conversation to safer topics. The expansion plans, the employee ownership program, the challenges they'd face in implementing both. By the time dessert arrived, they were back in familiar territory, two colleagues working through business problems together. But there was an undercurrent now, an awareness of each other that hadn't been there before. When the check came, Alexander insisted on paying. "Business dinner?" he said with a small smile. "Company expense." Outside, the night air was cool against Maya's skin as they walked to their respective cars. "I'll see you tomorrow," she said, fishing her keys from her purse. Alexander stood close, but not too close, respecting the boundaries she'd drawn. "Maya," he said softly, "I understand why you want to wait. And I respect it. But I want you to know that what I feel for you, it isn't new, and it isn't just because of that dress. It's been building for a long time." Her heart thumped hard in her chest. "Alexander. You don't need to say anything," he continued. "I just wanted you to know. When you feel you've proven yourself, if you still want to explore this thing between us, I'll be here." Before she could respond, he leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek, his lips barely grazing her skin, and then he was walking to his own car, leaving her standing there, keys in hand, heart racing. Maya drove home in a daze, her mind replaying his words. What he felt for her had been building for a long time. The realization that Alexander Stone, billionaire CEO, had been harboring feelings for her, his assistant, was almost too much to process. But even more confusing were her own feelings. The attraction, yes, she'd have to be blind not to notice his good looks, his charm. But it was more than that. It was 5 years of working side by side, of seeing the man behind the power, of sharing late nights and early mornings and small triumphs and bitter disappointments. She hadn't just fallen for her boss. She'd fallen for the man she knew better than perhaps anyone else did. The next morning, Maya arrived at work early as usual, determined to maintain professionalism despite the emotional turmoil inside her. She had just settled at her desk when her phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line made her stomach drop. "Executive Board Emergency Meeting 9 a.m. The sender was Richard Thompson. Something was wrong. Emergency board meetings were rare, and they were never called by individual board members unless there was a serious issue. Just then Alexander emerged from the elevator, a frown creasing his forehead as he strode toward her desk. "Did you see?" They both began at the same time. "Yes," Maya said. "Do you know what it's about?" Alexander's expression was grim. "I have a pretty good idea. Thompson's been making calls to other board members since yesterday. He's not happy about your promotion. Can he block it?" Maya asked, a cold feeling settling in her stomach. "Not alone, no. But if he's convinced enough of them." He didn't need to finish the thought. Maya understood the politics at play. A united board could force Alexander's hand even as CEO. "What do we do?" she asked. Alexander squared his shoulders, his jaw set in determination. "We fight. Together. You've earned this position, Maya. I won't let them take it from you because of outdated prejudices or unfounded rumors." The intensity in his voice gave her strength. Whatever was happening between them personally, she knew in that moment that Alexander believed in her professionally without reservation. "Okay," she said, standing up and smoothing her skirt. "Then let's go convince the board that I'm the right person for this job." As they walked toward the boardroom together, Maya felt a mix of fear and resolve. This would be her first real challenge as chief of staff, and it was a fight for her own position. But she wasn't alone. Alexander walked beside her, his presence steady and reassuring. The whispers might try to tear her down, but Maya Johnson wasn't going anywhere without a fight. The tension in the boardroom was palpable as Maya and Alexander entered. 8 people sat around the large oval table, their expressions ranging from curious to openly hostile. Richard Thompson sat at the far end, directly opposite Alexander's usual seat at the head of the table. "Ah, there you are, Alexander," Thompson said, his tone falsely pleasant. "And Ms. Johnson. How appropriate that you've joined us." Alexander didn't rise to the bait. "Maya is joining us in her capacity as the new chief of staff," he said firmly, pulling out a chair for her near his own. "As this meeting apparently concerns her appointment, it's only right that she be present." Maya sat down, keeping her back straight and her expression neutral despite the churning in her stomach. She nodded respectfully to each board member, including Thompson. "Now," Alexander continued, taking his seat, "would someone like to explain why an emergency board meeting was called without my knowledge?" Thompson cleared his throat. "Several board members and I have concerns about recent developments within the company." "Be specific, Richard," Alexander said, his voice cool. "Very well." Thompson placed his hands flat on the table. "Specifically, We are concerned about the creation of this new chief of staff position and the appointment of Ms. Johnson to fill it. On what grounds? Alexander challenged. Thompson looked directly at Maya. Ms. Johnson, while I'm sure very efficient as an assistant, has no executive experience. No MBA. No background in strategic leadership. We believe this appointment was made hastily and without proper consideration of more qualified candidates. Maya felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her composure. She had expected this line of attack. If I may respond, she asked, looking to Alexander, who nodded. Mr. Thompson, Maya began, her voice steady, while it's true that I don't have the traditional credentials you mentioned, I do have 5 years of experience at the highest level of this company. I've been involved in every major decision, every crisis, every triumph. I know the operations of Stone Enterprises inside and out. Answering phones and scheduling meetings hardly qualifies as being involved in major decisions, Thompson scoffed. Is that all you think executive assistants do? Maya asked, allowing a small edge to enter her voice. My role has encompassed far more than administrative tasks. I've prepared briefings for board meetings like this one. I've conducted research that informs strategic decisions. I was directly involved in planning the expansion we're currently undertaking. Another board member, Janet Chin, spoke up. That may be true, Maya, but there's still a significant leap from support staff to executive leadership. A leap I believe she is more than capable of making, Alexander interjected. Need I remind everyone that this is ultimately my decision as CEO? A decision that affects the entire company, Thompson countered. And one that seems unusually personal in nature. There it was, the insinuation Maya had been dreading. She felt several pairs of eyes shift to her, assessing, wondering. What exactly are you implying, Richard? Alexander's voice had dropped dangerously low. I'm merely suggesting that there might be factors beyond professional merit influencing this decision. The room fell silent. Maya could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. Then, surprisingly, Janet Chin spoke again. Richard, that's out of line. Unless you have specific evidence to support such an accusation, I suggest you withdraw it. Maya shot Chin a grateful glance. She had always found the older woman intimidating but fair. I'm not accusing anyone of anything, Thompson backpedaled slightly. I'm simply raising legitimate concerns about corporate governance and proper succession planning. Then let's address those concerns directly, Alexander said, his tone businesslike once more. Maya, would you mind sharing the transition plan you've been working on? I believe it addresses many of these issues. Maya nodded, grateful for the opportunity to shift to solid ground. She opened her tablet and pulled up the document she'd been refining all week. I've prepared a detailed 90-day plan, she began, her professional confidence returning as she spoke about the work she knew so well. It outlines my transition from EA to Chief of Staff, including key responsibilities, departmental integrations, and metrics for success. She walked the board through the plan, detailing how she would work with each department head, how she would measure her own performance, and the value she expected to bring to the executive team. As she spoke, she could see some of the skepticism in the room beginning to fade. I've also identified areas where I need to strengthen my knowledge, she continued. I've enrolled in an executive leadership program at the business school downtown, which begins next month. And I've arranged meetings with each of you individually, to better understand your perspectives and priorities. This last point seemed to surprise several board members, including Thompson. Maya had deliberately included it in her plan, knowing she would need allies on the board. When she finished her presentation, there was a moment of silence. Then Janet Chin spoke. That's quite thorough, Maya. I'm impressed by your foresight. Thank you, Miss Chin, Maya replied. I still have reservations, Thompson said, though his tone had lost some of its edge. This is an unprecedented move. So was bringing in an outside CEO when the company was founded, Alexander pointed out. So was our expansion into international markets. So is our employee ownership program. Stone Enterprises has always thrived by making bold moves, Richard. This is just the latest. And what if it doesn't work out? Another board member asked. What if Ms. Johnson isn't able to handle the responsibilities? Then I'll have failed, Maya said simply. And I'll step down. But I don't intend to fail. The directness of her answer seemed to resonate with the room. Even Thompson looked somewhat mollified. I propose we approve Maya's appointment provisionally, Janet Chin suggested. With a review in 3 months, based on the metrics she's outlined in her plan. If she meets or exceeds those metrics, the position becomes permanent. Alexander looked to Maya, silently asking if she was comfortable with this compromise. She gave a small nod. I think that's reasonable, Alexander agreed. All in favor? Hands went up around the table. Not all of them. Thompson and one other board member kept their hands firmly down, but enough to form a majority. Then it's settled, Alexander concluded. Maya Johnson is confirmed as Chief of Staff, with a 3-month probationary period. We'll reconvene to review her performance at the end of that time. As the meeting broke up, Maya felt a complex mix of emotions: relief that she'd kept her position, determination to prove herself, and lingering frustration at having to defend her worthiness in the first place. Alexander caught up with her in the hallway outside. You were brilliant in there, he said quietly. Thank you for backing me, she replied. But this isn't over. Thompson won't give up so easily. No, he won't, Alexander agreed. Which means you and I need to be above reproach for the next 3 months. Professionally and personally. The implication was clear. Whatever was developing between them would have to be put on hold, completely on hold, until her position was secure. I understand, Maya said, trying to ignore the pang of disappointment she felt. We keep things strictly business until I've proven myself. Alexander nodded, his expression unreadable. 3 months. And then we'll talk again. 3 months, Maya echoed. As they returned to the main office, walking a careful distance apart, Maya squared her shoulders. She had 3 months to prove to the board, to the company, and to herself that she deserved this position. 3 months to establish herself as a leader in her own right. The whispering had to stop. And the only way to stop it was to be so good at her job that no one could question her right to be there. The challenge had been set. Now she just had to rise to it. The next 3 months were the most challenging of Maya's professional life. She threw herself into her new role with a determination bordering on obsession, arriving at the office before dawn and often leaving well after dark. Her new office, a corner space with windows on 2 sides, remained largely undecorated, save for a few essential reference books and a single plant that her sister had sent as a congratulatory gift. She had no time for personal touches. Every minute was devoted to proving herself worthy of this position. And she was succeeding. Department heads who had initially been skeptical of her appointment now sought her input on their projects. Her executive leadership course was going well, with her professor frequently using her insights as examples for the class. The expansion plans were proceeding on schedule, with Maya personally overseeing much of the implementation. But her success came at a price. The distance she maintained from Alexander was professional but palpable. They spoke daily, of course. Their roles required constant communication, but always about work, always in settings where others were present or could walk in at any moment. No more private dinners. No more personal conversations. No more lingering glances or accidental touches. Maya told herself it was necessary. Thompson and his allies were watching for any sign of impropriety, any hint that her promotion was based on personal rather than professional considerations. She couldn't give them ammunition. Alexander respected her boundaries, never pushing for more than she was willing to give. But sometimes she caught him looking at her with an expression that made her heart ache, a mixture of pride and longing that mirrored her own feelings. 2 months into her probationary period, Maya sat in her office reviewing the quarterly numbers. The expansion was paying off already, with new offices reporting stronger than projected growth. The employee ownership program had boosted morale and productivity across all departments. By any objective measure, the company was thriving under their leadership. A knock at her door made her look up. Janet Chin stood there, elegant as always in a tailored suit. Do you have a moment, Maya? The board member asked. Of course, Miss Chin. Please come in. Maya gestured to the chair across from her desk. Janet took a seat, studying Maya with thoughtful eyes. I wanted to check in with you before the final review next month. How are you finding the role? Challenging, Maya admitted. But in the best way. There's so much to learn, so much to do. Janet nodded. The feedback I'm hearing has been overwhelmingly positive. Even Richard has been impressed by your handling of the Singapore office transition. Maya allowed herself a small smile. The Singapore expansion had been particularly complex, with cultural and regulatory hurdles that she'd navigated successfully. That's good to hear, she said cautiously. I know Mr. Thompson had concerns about my appointment. Richard has concerns about everything, Janet said with a dismissive wave. But he's not unreasonable. When presented with results, he acknowledges them. I'm glad to hear that. Janet leaned forward slightly. But that's not the only reason I stopped by. I wanted to talk to you about Alexander. Maya tensed. What about him? The two of you seem Different with each other lately. More formal. Less in sync than you used to be. We're both adjusting to our new working relationship, Maya said carefully. Janet's knowing look made it clear she wasn't fooled. Maya, I've been on this board for 15 years. I've watched Alexander build this company from a startup in his garage to what it is today. And I've never seen him as effective as he was when you were at his side. I'm still at his side, Maya pointed out. Just in a different capacity now. Yes, but there's a distance between you that wasn't there before. It's affecting him whether he admits it or not. And that affects the company. Maya wasn't sure how to respond. She couldn't explain to Janet that the distance was deliberate, a defense against the very rumors it was now apparently creating. Miss Chin. Janet, please. Janet, Maya corrected herself. Alexander and I are committed to the success of Stone Enterprises. Any personal considerations have been set aside for the good of the company. The older woman studied her for a long moment. You know, when I first started out in business, things were very different for women. Especially women of color. We were expected to be twice as good, twice as professional, twice as careful about our personal lives. Maya nodded, recognizing the truth in this. But Maya, Janet continued, there's a difference between being professional and denying yourself happiness. Trust me on this, I've made that mistake. What are you suggesting? Maya asked, though she already knew. I'm suggesting that whatever is between you and Alexander, and don't tell me there's nothing because I have eyes, it doesn't have to be sacrificed for your career. Not if it's real. Maya felt a lump forming in her throat. There are complications. Perceptions. There always are, Janet agreed. But from what I've seen these past 2 months, you've more than proven your worth in this role. No one can credibly suggest otherwise, not even Richard. She stood to leave, smoothing her skirt. Just something to think about before your review next month. Sometimes the hardest part isn't proving yourself to others, it's allowing yourself to have what you've earned. After Janet left, Maya sat for a long time, staring out the window at the city below. She had been so focused on proving herself professionally that she had shut down everything else. Not just her feelings for Alexander, but her friendships, her hobbies, even regular calls with her family. Was it worth it? She was succeeding in her new role, yes. But at what cost? That evening, as the office emptied out, Maya found herself walking toward Alexander's office before she could second-guess herself. His door was open, and he was standing by the window, looking out at the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. "Do you have a minute?" she asked from the doorway. He turned, surprise and pleasure crossing his face. "For you? Always." Maya stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "I had an interesting conversation with Janet Chin today." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "Oh. She thinks we're being too distant with each other? That it's affecting the company." A small smile touched his lips. "Janet always was perceptive. She also thinks I've proven myself. That no one could credibly question my right to this position anymore." Alexander moved away from the window, coming to stand closer to her. "She's right. You've exceeded everyone's expectations, Maya. Even mine, and I already thought you were extraordinary." The warmth in his voice made her heart beat faster. "I've missed you," she admitted quietly. "These past 2 months working together but not really talking. Not like we used to." "I've missed you too," Alexander said. "More than I can say." They stood looking at each other, the distance between them suddenly charged with possibility. "My review is still a month away," Maya said. "A month is a long time," Alexander agreed, his eyes never leaving hers. "But not as long as the 2 months we've already managed," she added, taking a small step toward him. Alexander didn't move, letting her come to him of her own accord. "Maya," he said softly. "Whatever you want, however you want to handle this, it's your decision. I'll follow your lead." The fact that he was giving her this power, this control over their relationship, meant more to Maya than any words of affection could have. Alexander understood that this was about more than just the two of them. It was about her career, her reputation, her hard-won professional standing. "I think," she said slowly, "that I'm tired of pretending I don't feel what I feel. But I'm also not ready to go public, not until after my review." "So where does that leave us?" Alexander asked. Maya took another step closer. "Somewhere in the middle," she suggested. "Not hiding but not advertising either. Taking things slowly. Seeing where it leads." Alexander smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his entire face. "I'd like that," he said. "Very much." He reached out, gently taking her hand in his. Such a simple touch, but after 2 months of careful distance, it felt electric. Have dinner with me tonight, he said. Not as colleagues. Just as us. Maya looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. The face she knew so well had missed so much. Yes, she said simply. I'd like that. As they left the office together that evening, maintaining a professional distance in the elevator and lobby, Maya felt as though a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The challenge wasn't over, her final review still loomed and Thompson would still be watching for any sign of impropriety, but for the first time in months she felt like herself again. The separation had been necessary, perhaps. A time for her to establish herself independently, to prove her worth beyond any doubt. But it had also been a time of denying a fundamental truth, that whatever was between her and Alexander was real and powerful and worth exploring. Now, as they drove separately to the restaurant he had chosen, Maya allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she could have both, the career she had worked so hard for and the man she had grown to love. The restaurant Alexander had chosen was intimate but not romantic. A small bistro with good food and a relaxed atmosphere, where they could talk without feeling like they were on display. They were seated in a corner booth, private enough for conversation but still in full view of other diners. Is this okay? Alexander asked as they settled in. I wanted somewhere we could actually talk. Maya smiled, appreciating his thoughtfulness. It's perfect. For the first few minutes, there was an awkwardness between them that had never existed before, not even when she was just his assistant. They struggled to find topics that weren't work-related, realizing how much of their relationship had been defined by the office. Tell me something I don't know about you, Alexander said finally after they had ordered. Something that never came up in 5 years of working together. Maya considered the question. I used to compete in spoken word poetry contests in college. His eyebrows rose in surprise. Really? I had no idea you were a poet. I wasn't very good, she admitted with a laugh. But I loved the energy of it, the way words could move a crowd. Would you ever perform one for me? Alexander asked, his eyes warm with genuine interest. Maya felt her cheeks heat slightly. Maybe someday. If you're very, very lucky. I already am, he said softly. The sincerity in his voice made something flutter in her chest. Your turn, she said. Tell me something I don't know about Alexander Stone. He thought for a moment. I almost became a chef instead of an entrepreneur. Now it was Maya's turn to be surprised. You cook. I used to. My grandmother taught me everything she knew about Italian cooking. After she died, I seriously considered culinary school instead of business school. What changed your mind? Alexander's expression grew thoughtful. I realized I could create something bigger than just a restaurant. Something that could employ hundreds of people, make a real difference. And you have, Maya said. Look at what Stone Enterprises has become. Their food arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. As they ate, they continued trading stories. Maya about her sisters and the competitive household she'd grown up in, Alexander about his lonely years at boarding school and how they had shaped his drive to succeed. I never would have guessed you were lonely, Maya said. You always seem so self-sufficient. I got good at pretending, Alexander admitted. But everyone needs connection. Even billionaire CEOs. His eyes held hers meaningfully. By the time dessert arrived, a shared tiramisu that they both agreed was only half as good as Paolo's, the awkwardness had completely disappeared. They were just Alexander and Maya now, two people enjoying each other's company, learning the contours of a relationship that existed outside the office walls. I've been thinking about what comes next, Alexander said as he paid the bill, waving away Maya's attempt to contribute. After your review. And what have you been thinking? She asked, curious. That I'd like to take you somewhere. A real date, not dinner at a safe distance from the office. Maybe a weekend away even. The proposal was bold but tempting. A weekend away would mean being seen together, publicly acknowledging whatever was developing between them. Let's get through the review first, Maya said, not wanting to get ahead of herself. Then we can talk about weekends away. Alexander nodded, respecting her caution. Of course. One step at a time. Outside, the night air was cool but pleasant. They walked slowly to their cars, parked side by side in the small lot behind the restaurant. I had a wonderful time tonight, Maya said as they reached her car. So did I, Alexander replied, standing close but not touching her. Can we do it again soon? Maya nodded. I'd like that. For a moment they just looked at each other, the tension between them palpable. Then, with deliberate slowness, Maya stepped forward and tilted her face up to his. Alexander needed no further invitation. His lips met hers in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened. his arms wrapping around her waist as hers went around his neck. Unlike their first brief kiss outside her apartment, this one held nothing back. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that for 2 months," he murmured. "Me too," Maya admitted. They stood like that for a long moment, just holding each other in the quiet parking lot, savoring the closeness they had denied themselves for so long. "I should go," Maya said eventually, though she made no move to pull away. "I know," Alexander agreed, equally reluctant. With a final, soft kiss they separated. Maya got into her car, her heart fuller than it had been in months. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and stolen moments. They were careful at the office, maintaining professional distance during the day. But evenings often found them at dinner together or at Maya's apartment, talking for hours, slowly peeling back the layers of formality that had defined their relationship for so long. They didn't rush things physically, both understanding the importance of building something solid, something that could withstand the scrutiny they would eventually face. But each day brought them closer, the connection between them deepening in ways that went far beyond physical attraction. A week before Maya's final review, she was working late in her office, preparing her presentation for the board. She had data showing her impact on the company, testimonials from department heads, metrics demonstrating the success of initiatives she had overseen. By any objective measure, she had excelled in her role as chief of staff. A knock at her door made her look up. Richard Thompson stood there, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Thompson," Maya said, surprised. "Can I help you with something?" "I hope so, Ms. Johnson," he replied, stepping into her office without waiting for an invitation. "I wanted to speak with you before the review next week." Maya gestured to the chair across from her desk, her guard immediately up. "Of course. What can I do for you?" Thompson sat down, studying her with calculating eyes. "You've done remarkably well these past 3 months," he began, his tone giving nothing away. "The numbers speak for themselves." "Thank you," Maya said cautiously. "I've worked hard to prove myself in this role." "Yes, I can see that." Thompson leaned forward slightly. "Which is why I'm giving you this opportunity to be honest with me before the board meeting." Maya's spine stiffened. "I'm not sure what you mean." Thompson's expression hardened. "I think you do, Ms. Johnson. I'm talking about your relationship with Alexander Stone." Her heart rate accelerated, but she kept her face neutral. "Mr. Stone is my boss and my colleague. We have a professional relationship." "Is that all it is?" Thompson challenged. "Because I have evidence suggesting otherwise." Maya's blood ran cold. "Evidence?" From his briefcase, Thompson produced several photographs. He laid them on her desk one by one. Maya looked down and felt her stomach drop. There she was with Alexander outside the bistro, locked in that passionate kiss. Another showed them entering her apartment building together. A third captured them holding hands across a restaurant table. "Where did you get these?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Does it matter?" Thompson countered. "What matters is what they represent. A clear conflict of interest. A CEO becoming romantically involved with an employee he directly promoted to an executive position." Maya fought to keep her composure. "These were all taken after hours outside of work. What Alexander and I do in our personal time is the board's business when it affects the company," Thompson interrupted. "Surely you can see how this looks, Ms. Johnson? How it undermines the legitimacy of your position." She could see it, of course. It was exactly what she had feared from the beginning, that her relationship with Alexander, whatever its true nature, would be used to discount her professional accomplishments. "What do you want, Mr. Thompson?" Maya asked directly, tired of the games. "I want what's best for Stone Enterprises," he replied smoothly. "I believe you do too. And what do you think is best?" Thompson leaned back in his chair. "I think it would be best if you resigned your position before the review. Cite personal reasons if you like. A graceful exit." Maya stared at him in disbelief. "You want me to quit? After everything I've accomplished these past 3 months? I'm offering you a dignified way out," Thompson said. "The alternative would be to present these photos to the board, force a vote on your position, create a public scandal that would hurt everyone involved, including Alexander." There was the veiled threat. If she didn't resign, Thompson would make this public, potentially damaging Alexander's reputation and leadership. "I need to think about this," Maya said, buying time. Thompson stood. "Of course. You have until tomorrow afternoon. I'm sure you'll make the right decision." After he left, Maya sat motionless, staring at the photographs still spread across her desk. All their caution, all their careful distance at work, undone by a few private moments they had thought were hidden from prying eyes. She should have known better. In the corporate world, privacy was an illusion, especially for people in positions like hers and Alexander's. What should she do now? Resign as Thompson wanted? Fight, knowing the humiliation and scrutiny that would follow? Either way, her professional reputation, the thing she had worked so hard to build, would be tarnished. Maya gathered the photographs and slipped them into her desk drawer. Then, with a heavy heart, she reached for her phone to call Alexander. He needed to know what was happening. Together, perhaps they could find a way forward. But as her finger hovered over his contact, she hesitated. This was exactly the scenario she had feared from the beginning, her feelings for Alexander being used against her, used to undermine everything she had achieved. Maybe Thompson was right. Maybe a graceful exit was the best option. For her, for Alexander, for the company they had both worked so hard to build. With a deep sigh, Maya put down her phone and instead began to draft a resignation letter. The words came slowly, painfully, each one an acknowledgement of defeat. But as she wrote, something shifted inside her. A spark of anger ignited, growing stronger with each word. Why should she resign? She had earned this position. Her relationship with Alexander had developed after her promotion, not before. And even if it had influenced his decision, hadn't he said himself that his feelings had been building for years? She had more than proved her worth these past 3 months. Why should she let Thompson's threats dictate her life? Her career? Her heart? With sudden decisiveness, Maya deleted the resignation letter. Instead, she picked up her phone and dialed. "Alexander," she said when he answered. "We need to talk. No. It's about us, and it's about Thompson." The time for hiding was over. Whatever came next, they would face it together, with the truth. Alexander arrived at Maya's office in less than 20 minutes, his face tight with concern. He closed the door behind him, taking in her tense posture and the determined set of her jaw. "What happened?" he asked without preamble. Wordlessly, Maya opened her desk drawer and spread out the photographs Thompson had left. Alexander examined them, his expression darkening with each image. "He wants me to resign," Maya explained, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "Before the board review next week. He's threatening to show these to the board if I don't." Alexander's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "This is blackmail," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "And incredibly invasive. Yet you followed? Photographed." "Apparently." Maya stood, pacing the length of her office. "The question is, what do we do about it?" Alexander looked up at her, surprise evident in his expression. "You're not considering resigning, are you?" "For about 5 minutes I was," Maya admitted. "Then I got angry. I've worked too hard to be pushed out this way." Relief washed over Alexander's face. "Good. Because I was prepared to talk you out of it if needed." "So what's our plan?" Maya asked, stopping her pacing to face him. "If I don't resign, Thompson shows these photos to the board. He creates a scandal. Questions my qualifications, your judgment, probably demands both our resignations." Alexander was quiet for a moment, thinking. "What if we beat him to it?" he finally suggested. "What do you mean?" "We bring this to the board ourselves. Before Thompson can. We don't hide, we don't apologize. We lay out the facts, all of them." Maya considered the idea. "You think they'll understand?" "I think most of them will," Alexander said. "Janet already suspects and she's been supportive. Even the old guard aren't unreasonable when presented with the truth." "And what is the truth, Alexander?" Maya asked softly. "What exactly are we telling them about us?" He moved closer to her, taking her hands in his. "The truth is that I promoted you because you earned it, because you're the most qualified person for the job. And separately, I'm falling in love with you." His voice dropped to a near whisper on the last words. "That's what we tell them. If they don't like it, well, it's my company. I'll fight for it. And for you." Maya's heart swelled at his declaration. "I'm falling in love with you too," she admitted, the words feeling both frightening and right. "But I don't want to be the reason you lose control of your company." "You won't be," Alexander assured her. "Thompson doesn't have as much support as he thinks. Most of the board respects results and you've delivered those in spades." Maya took a deep breath, making her decision. "Okay. We face this head-on. Together." Alexander squeezed her hands. "Together," he agreed. They spent the next hour planning their approach. They would call an emergency board meeting for the following afternoon, before Thompson's deadline. They would present Maya's performance review data first, establishing her professional credentials beyond any doubt. Then, they would address the personal relationship directly, being honest about its development after her promotion, and making it clear that they had kept things strictly professional in the workplace. It's a risk, Maya acknowledged as they finalized their strategy. But it's better than letting Thompson control the narrative. Much better, Alexander agreed. And Maya? No matter what happens tomorrow, I want you to know that what I feel for you, it's real. More real than anything I've felt in a long time. She smiled, drawing strength from his certainty. For me too. The next morning, Maya arrived at the office earlier than usual, her stomach in knots but her resolve firm. The emergency board meeting was set for 2 p.m., called by Alexander with no specific agenda mentioned, just an urgent matter requiring immediate attention. At 1:30, Thompson appeared at her office door, his expression smug. Have you made your decision, Ms. Johnson? Maya stood, gathering the folder containing her presentation materials. I have, Mr. Thompson. I'll be addressing it at the board meeting at 2. His confidence faltered slightly. What board meeting? The emergency session Alexander called. I assumed you'd received the notification. Thompson's face darkened with suspicion. What are you playing at? No games, Maya said, walking past him toward the door. Just the truth. I suggest you don't be late. She left him standing there, feeling a small surge of satisfaction at having caught him off guard. The balance of power had shifted, if only slightly. By 2 p.m., the boardroom was filled with confused but curious board members. Alexander sat at the head of the table, Maya to his right, not hidden away as an assistant might be, but positioned clearly as an executive. Thompson entered last, his eyes darting between them suspiciously. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, Alexander began once everyone was seated. I called this meeting to address a situation that affects the leadership of this company. Maya could feel Thompson tensing across the table, clearly wondering if they were about to resign. First, Alexander continued, I want to present an early performance review for our Chief of Staff, Maya Johnson. As you know, her formal review was scheduled for next week, but circumstances have made it necessary to move up the timeline. He nodded to Maya, who distributed copies of her report to each board member. As you can see, she began, finding her professional voice despite her nerves, the initiatives I've overseen during my probationary period have exceeded projections across all metrics. She walked them through the data, the successful expansion, the implementation of the employee ownership program, the streamlining of operations that had resulted in a 15% increase in productivity. The board members listened attentively, some nodding with approval at the impressive results. Even Thompson couldn't dispute the numbers, though his expression remained sour. When Maya finished her presentation, Alexander spoke again. Based on these results, I'm recommending that the board confirm Maya's position as Chief of Staff, effective immediately, without waiting for the formal review next week. All in favor? Hands went up around the table, all except Thompson and one of his allies. The vote was overwhelmingly in Maya's favor. Thank you, Alexander said, noting the result. Now there is another matter we need to address. He paused, his gaze moving to Thompson. It has come to my attention that concerns have been raised about a personal relationship between myself and Ms. Johnson. A murmur went through the room. Thompson straightened in his chair, clearly not having expected this direct approach. Rather than allowing this to become fodder for gossip or manipulation, Alexander continued, his voice steady, we've chosen to address it openly with this board. Maya took over, her heart pounding but her voice clear. Mr. Stone and I have indeed begun to explore a personal relationship outside of work hours. This development occurred after my promotion to Chief of Staff, not before. We have maintained strict professionalism in the workplace and will continue to do so. However, Alexander added, in the interest of transparency, we wanted you all to be aware. If the board feels this represents a conflict of interest, we are prepared to discuss appropriate measures to address those concerns. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then Janet Chin spoke up. I appreciate your candor, she said. Many companies have policies for this type of situation. Recusal from certain decisions, additional oversight if needed. I see no reason why similar measures wouldn't work here. This is outrageous, Thompson finally sputtered. A CEO dating his direct report? It's completely inappropriate. Is it the relationship that concerns you, Richard? Janet asked coolly. Or is it the fact that Maya has proven herself more than capable in a role you didn't think she deserved? Thompson's face reddened. This has nothing to do with her qualifications. It's about proper corporate governance. Then let's discuss proper governance, Alexander suggested, including the ethics of having an employee followed and photographed outside of work hours. He produced the photos Thompson had given Maya, placing them on the table. These were delivered to Ms. Johnson yesterday as part of a threat to force her resignation. The board members leaned forward to look at the images, expressions of shock and distaste crossing several faces. You had her followed? One board member asked Thompson, clearly appalled. Thompson's composure cracked further. I was acting in the best interests of the company. These photos prove that they've been lying about their relationship. We haven't lied to anyone, Maya said firmly. We've kept our personal lives separate from our professional responsibilities. Until you chose to violate our privacy. The tide of the room was turning visibly against Thompson. Board members who had initially seemed concerned about the relationship now appeared more disturbed by his tactics. I move that we accept Maya Johnson's performance review and confirm her position permanently, Janet Chin announced. And further, that we establish a committee to draft guidelines for handling potential conflicts of interest in situations like this, rather than resorting to intimidation. Seconded, another board member quickly added. All in favor? Alexander asked. This time, every hand went up except Thompson's. Even his previous ally had abandoned him. Motion carried, Alexander declared. And one more item of business. His gaze fixed on Thompson. Richard, in light of your actions, I'm requesting your resignation from this board, effective immediately. Thompson's face went from red to white. You can't do that. I'm a founding board member. Actually, he can, Janet pointed out. With cause and with a majority board vote. She looked around the table. I think we've just established both. One by one, the board members voiced their agreement. Thompson, seeing he was outnumbered, gathered his papers with shaking hands. You'll regret this, he said to Alexander. Both of you will. I don't think so, Alexander replied calmly. Stone Enterprises deserves leadership with integrity. Maya has demonstrated that. You unfortunately have not. After Thompson stormed out, the meeting concluded quickly. The board members filed out, several stopping to congratulate Maya on her permanent appointment, a few even offering words of support about her relationship with Alexander. Janet was the last to leave. Well played, she said to both of them. Though I suspect this isn't the last we'll hear from Thompson. Probably not, Alexander agreed. But we'll deal with whatever comes next. When they were finally alone in the boardroom, Maya let out a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. We did it, she said, half disbelieving. Alexander moved to her side, taking her hand in his. You did it, he corrected. You stood your ground. You didn't let him intimidate you into giving up what you've earned. We did it together, Maya insisted. The way we do everything best. Alexander smiled, bringing her hand to his lips for a brief kiss. Together, he agreed. So, Chief of Staff Johnson, what comes next? Maya looked at him, this man who had been her boss, then her colleague, and now something much more important. I believe you mentioned something about a weekend away? His smile widened. I did indeed. Are you saying yes? I'm saying yes, Maya confirmed, her heart full. To the weekend and to whatever comes after that. As they left the boardroom side by side, heads held high, Maya knew that there would still be challenges ahead. Thompson might be gone from the board, but the whispers wouldn't stop immediately. There would still be those who questioned her abilities, who attributed her success to her relationship with Alexander. But for the first time since that night at the gala when she had stood frozen in her golden dress, Maya felt truly confident about her future, both professionally and personally. She had proven herself. She had fought for what she deserved. And she had found love in the most unexpected place. Whatever came next, they would face it together. 1 year later, Maya stood at the window of her corner office, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in hues of gold and pink. So much had changed in a year. The company had continued to expand, opening offices in 3 new countries. The employee ownership program had become a model that other corporations were scrambling to imitate. And Maya herself had grown into her role as chief of staff with a confidence that silenced even the most persistent doubters. Her relationship with Alexander had evolved too, deepening into something neither of them had expected when they'd first crossed that line from professional to personal. They still maintained clear boundaries at work. Separate offices, formal behavior in meetings, no public displays of affection. But everyone knew they were a couple now, and after the initial flurry of gossip had died down, it had simply become another fact of life at Stone Enterprises. Ready to go? Alexander's voice came from the doorway. Maya turned, smiling at the sight of him. Almost. Just finishing up a few things. He came to stand beside her at the window. Beautiful view. It is, she agreed, though she was looking at him rather than the skyline. Hard to believe it's been a year since that gala, Alexander mused. Since you confronted me on the terrace in that golden dress. Maya laughed softly. That feels like a lifetime ago. In some ways it was, he said, taking her hand. We were different people then. It was true. They had both changed, grown. Alexander had learned to delegate more, to trust others, especially Maya, with parts of his vision. Maya had found her voice as a leader, earning the respect of everyone from entry-level employees to the board of directors. And together they had built something special, both within the company and between themselves. We should get going, Maya said, reluctantly turning from the view. We don't want to be late for our own party. Tonight was the one-year anniversary celebration of the expansion announcement. The entire company would be gathering at the same hotel where the fateful gala had been held a year ago. It felt right somehow, coming full circle to where it all began. As Maya gathered her things, her phone buzzed with a message from her sister. Knock him dead tonight, sis. Love you. Maya smiled, texting back a quick thanks. Her family had been incredibly supportive throughout the past year, especially when the relationship with Alexander had become public. Her mother, initially wary about her dating her boss, had been won over when she saw how happy Maya was, how respected she was in her role. Cars waiting downstairs, Alexander said, holding the door for her. As they rode the elevator down, standing a professional distance apart despite being alone, Maya felt a flutter of anticipation in her stomach. Tonight was special not just because of the anniversary. There was something else, something Alexander didn't know about yet. The car ride to the hotel was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Maya watched the city pass by outside the window, remembering the nervousness she'd felt a year ago, arriving at the gala alone, unaware that her life was about to change completely. Penny for your thoughts? Alexander asked, his hand finding hers in the space between them. Just thinking about how much has happened in a year, she replied. About how scary it was, taking that first step into the unknown. He squeezed her hand gently. Was it worth it? Maya turned to him, taking in the face she had come to love so deeply. Every moment, she said softly. When they arrived at the hotel, they were greeted by applause from employees already gathering in the lobby. Maya and Alexander had become something of a power couple within the company, their partnership a symbol of Stone Enterprises' progressive, merit-based culture. Speech, someone called as they entered the grand ballroom, now filled with hundreds of employees from around the world. Alexander laughed, raising a hand to quiet the crowd. Later, I promise. For now, enjoy the party. As they moved through the room, accepting congratulations and well wishes, Maya felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. These people weren't just colleagues. They were a community she had helped to build and nurture. Janet Chin appeared at her elbow, elegant as always in a silver cocktail dress. Quite a difference from last year, the board member observed. You're not hiding in the coat room eavesdropping this time. Maya laughed. You knew about that? I suspected, Janet admitted with a wink. Thompson was never as discreet as he thought he was. Speaking of their former board member, Richard Thompson had indeed tried to cause problems after his forced resignation. He had attempted to rally shareholders against Alexander, had even spoken to a few business journalists about leadership concerns at Stone Enterprises. But his efforts had gained no traction. The company's success under Alexander and Maya's leadership was too obvious, the support of the board too solid. Eventually, Thompson had retreated, taking a position with a competitor where rumor had it, he was already causing discord. How's married life treating you? Maya asked, noticing the new ring on Janet's finger. The older woman smiled, a girlish delight lighting her face. Wonderful. I should have done it years ago instead of putting my career first all the time. She gave Maya a meaningful look. Some things are worth prioritizing. Before Maya could respond, Alexander appeared at her side. Sorry to interrupt, but I need to borrow Ms. Johnson for a moment. Janet waved them off with a knowing smile. Of course. We'll catch up later. Alexander led Maya through the crowd, toward the same terrace where they had had their confrontation a year ago. The night air was cool but pleasant as they stepped outside, the sounds of the party fading behind them. Feeling nostalgic? Maya asked, looking out at the city lights spread below them. Something like that, Alexander admitted, a hint of nervousness in his voice that made Maya look at him more closely. Is everything okay? He nodded, taking both her hands in his. Everything is perfect, That's why I wanted to bring you out here. Maya's heart began to beat faster as Alexander continued. A year ago on this terrace you challenged me to be better. To think beyond profits to the people whose lives are affected by my decisions. His voice was low, intimate, meant only for her. What you didn't know then was that you had already been changing me, making me better for years. Every day we worked together, every idea you shared, every time you pushed back when I was wrong, you were shaping me into a better leader. A better man. Alexander, Maya began, but he shook his head gently. Let me finish, he said. This past year has been the best of my life, Maya. Building the company with you, coming home to you, waking up beside you each morning, it's shown me what really matters. Then, still holding her hands, Alexander did something that took Maya's breath away. He dropped to one knee. Maya Johnson, he said, looking up at her with eyes full of love, you walked into that gala a year ago in a golden dress and completely captured my heart. Will you marry me? From his pocket, he produced a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a stunning diamond ring. But Maya barely saw it, her vision blurred with tears of joy. Yes, she said, her voice catching. Yes, Alexander. I will marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to pull her into his arms. Their kiss was tender, full of promise for the future they would build together. When they finally broke apart, both a little breathless, Maya smiled up at him. I have something to tell you too, she said. Alexander raised an eyebrow, curious. What is it? Maya took a deep breath, then placed his hand gently over her stomach. We're going to have a baby, she said softly. I found out yesterday. For a moment, Alexander seemed frozen in shock. Then his face transformed with a joy so pure it made Maya's heart swell. A baby, he repeated, his voice filled with wonder. We're going to be parents? Maya nodded, her own happiness mirroring his. In about 7 months. Are you happy? In answer, Alexander lifted her off her feet in a gentle, careful embrace, spinning her around once before setting her down again. Happy doesn't begin to cover it, he said. I love you, Maya. More than I ever thought possible. I love you too, she replied, reaching up to touch his face. So much. Inside the ballroom, the party continued, unaware of the private celebration happening on the terrace. Soon they would go back in. Soon they would share their engagement with their colleagues and friends. Eventually they would announce the baby too, navigating yet another change in their relationship and their roles at the company. But for now this moment belonged just to them, a golden moment of perfect happiness, of promises made and futures entwined. As they stood together on the terrace, the city lights sparkling below like a reflection of the stars above, Maya thought about the journey that had brought them here. From assistant and CEO to colleagues to lovers to soon-to-be family. It hadn't been an easy path. There had been obstacles, doubts, moments of fear and separation. But standing here now in the arms of the man she loved, with new life growing inside her and a diamond ring catching the moonlight on her finger, Maya knew with absolute certainty that every step of that journey had been worth taking. The golden dress had started it all, catching Alexander's eye and making him truly see her for the first time. But it was their hearts that had forged this bond, their shared vision that had strengthened it, their love that had made it unbreakable. Ready to go back inside? Alexander asked after a long, peaceful moment. Maya nodded, taking his hand. Ready for anything, she said. As long as we're together. Hand in hand, they walked back into the light of the ballroom, into the future they would build together, as partners, as lovers, as family. The end. Kindly check out our next video.